We're going live. Hey everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm with JJ, and he is a phenomenal person to ask questions about VCs to. I've known him for several months now, and he's the first person I go to whenever I have questions about startup idea or how VCs think about design. He's worked for several years as design partner at Prime Movers Lab. He's also a fractional design leader available to startups and founders who are interested in hiring the first designer. JJ, how are you doing today, man?
Good, good. How are you? Thanks for having me here.
Well, the privilege is all mine because we're going to learn so much from you. I feel like with VCs, it's such a foreign world to most designers that we kind of see them as this overlord in some ways, where they fund the companies we work at, but we don't really understand what they're thinking. I guess we could start from the very, very beginning. What are VCs? Like, how are they different from other investors?
I think in general, there's like not much difference. They are just,
Yeah.
everyday bankers and investors and business people who, just put money somewhere. Um, but the fact that we call them VCs, that already creates a barrier of like, how to understanding them better, right?
Yeah.
Um, and instead of a retail investors where you would invest in like a stock, you just invest in a business before it became a stock or a thing, right? So, um, and it's just a very small group of people. Like we see, there are like, I don't know, maybe 5,000 firms around the world. Each firm only need like 5 to 10 people to operate. The biggest
Yeah.
ones maybe only like having 100 or 200 people, not including like the M&A huge institution. So because of how small they are, it's just very hard to get information out of them. So I think it kind of remains a secret behind these walls.
I see. So, how do you become a VC? Like, what is the required background? Like, can I be a VC if I wanted to?
I guess. Um, um, so so this might be just like semantics, right? Like I work at a VC. Some people do not let me call myself a VC because I'm not like a real investor where I invest in people in companies. Like there
Oh,
are
damn.
investing partners and what I do, which is called operating partner, right? But who cares? Like it's like fake it to make it, you wing it. So I call myself VC, and half of people do that too. Like whether if they are just like some small time analyst and a VC, they already call themselves VC. Why not? So how to get here on the business side? If you want to get into investing, most people come from business background. They either finish MBA, work at the big four companies as consultants for years, or they have run companies. They are a exec team of like some big or small company, doesn't matter. But what matters is that you made a good exit. You run it successfully for some years until people heard of you. In my case, where it's like not investing, um, there are several different functions in my area, which is like design is one, engineering, talent, HR, all the way to PR, and maybe sometimes like government relations, stuff like that. We do what we do um, until someone notices, which is similar to you how you make a good exit. So let's say if you work at a huge company, you make it to the top, people will hear your name, whether or not you do content or you market yourself or not. And then you have a network of people who might need your work, your help, your support. It started like that for me. Um, some investor want me to help look at a deal they were looking at. to do some due diligence on like if this would be a good investment long term. I think I can share this because it was like so long ago. It was InVision like 10 years ago, and I said it's so early. I can tell it's just like you can do this in one of the old Adobe software too. It's just like stitching screens together, and it went rocket crazy. I still kind of advise against invest in them, but then they keep going, keep working until like yeah, I made a wrong advice on that one. But what happened last month? Like I kind of like came to the conclusion that I kind of had a knack for this like for a long time, so I was in the right place. So it happened like that, right? And then so once you can prove that you can make some value for people who do not understand design, especially in this case, it's like you can help business people do the due diligence. I just got lucky because this is a design company, right? I have this expertise that I can talk about it.
Right.
I know in and out of
I
it.
see.
So that one just like led me to another kind of side gig to keep doing this. And then one day my colleagues, my founder that I worked with at my previous companies, he decided he wanted to create a VC firm too. So he just like, why don't you come along? And I kind of do that part-time for, I don't know, almost a year until like, oh, I think I can actually enjoy doing this. So I just like joined full-time for the past 6 years now. And I would
see.
say that is kind of similar to what I heard from other design partners in the VC world too. Nobody just kind of walks in like, hey, I want to do this. It's more like you keep your heads down, you keep doing your work as a designer until someone you got lucky, know somebody that knows somebody who needs your help. And then you just like kind of got picked, got pulled.
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused by this because as a designer, my job is to do hands-on design work as an IC, right?
Yep.
So it's about creating good design. It's about getting this product to be more successful in terms of revenue, business, whatnot.
Yep.
What you're talking about in a way is how people who are doing due diligence to evaluate the future profitability of a startup or business idea, they're asking for your unique perspective as a designer on whether or not this is valuable.
Right.
And I feel like these are two very different skill sets. Like you could be a really, really bad designer, but have a good eye and know like, hey, InVision's going to take off. Figma is going to take off. And you should definitely invest in those companies early on. And you could also be the opposite. You could be a really, really fabulous designer. You can be awesome at using Figma and creating really beautiful designs, but you just can't really, you're bad at predicting the future outcomes. So how does that work exactly? Because when you're saying, keep your head down and keep working, I don't like, there's no part of my job as a designer where I need to predict future success of anything really, besides maybe the product. I mean, even then it's like, I've told the PMs I've worked with or the, general manager, like, I think this product or feature isn't going to do well, and they ignore me.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
how does that?
that is not only true for designers, it's still true for investors themselves. What they do when they say due diligence, that is part of the work, yes. But after the fact, it's still a bet. It's just all gambling. I can be wrong, I can be right. But if it sounds good to them, if it makes sense to them, they like my advice. That's what all they want to hear. I don't have to be right. They don't have to be right. You know what? A couple of billionaires I know, and we always kind of joke about this, like, can you share your deepest secrets in investment? Like, of all your investments, how many actually go off? On average, it's like you made like 5,000 deals just to get one or two. And that if one or two go big, they will just pay off the rest of like what you fail. So you can afford to be wrong a lot. That is, yeah, it's a totally different skills that from a designer skill, but I would say it is a subset of UX, right? Like you do competitive analysis, but this is just like doing the deepest as you can in it. And this is your best conclusion about like this company or this deal. And in this case, because it is a design company, I am a design expert so that I can talk about that industry. And I know enough about their competitors and the landscape enough to be more confident than they would by themselves.
So right now, your work as a design partner, is a twofold where on one hand, they come to you for advice and for your unique perspective as a designer, whether or not these opportunities are good or not, and to get your feedback and your advice. Is there also a side where they need your design help, more like operational, to like support some web pages that needs to be designed or some product that needs some design eye?
Yeah, exactly. And the ratio between the two parts like varies a lot depending on the cycle of work and whatever the market. But let's say in a given year, we as a team look at least a couple thousand companies, look for the best, and we only invest in like maybe like 10 or 20. So that is like even less than 1%. We look at a lot of companies all the time. And yes, I will look and do the diligence from the UX angle, from user research angle. You know what always like fascinates me is that people these days, founders, they like to say that, oh, we care so much about UX. We want this to be very user friendly. We care so much about design. This has to be Apple great. But in fact, they just don't even know what UX stands for. They just like kind of like hear it from somewhere, and it's like, okay, just copy them. That it is my first screening question, like to just ask them, like to see if they really understand design when they want design. 90% of them will fail at this already. Like, and an easy question would be like, have you done any user research? They might not have ever heard user research before. Then they just like spin it to like a market research or whatever. And I was already know the answer that this might not go well. But for the 1% or less than that I think is a good deal, then we'll circle up as a team, share our perspectives on different angles, and then come to a conclusion that if this will be a good company to invest in or not. And once we invested in them, yes, then I and other team members will follow up and offer our support to do whatever they need to run a successful company. And I always kind of like compare this to the stock market, right? You put money in some companies. Do you want to take care of your money afterwards? Do you check, it goes up or down during the year, and you might make adjustments, right? It's exactly the same thing. It's a surprise to me where many VC firms do not do that. They don't follow up at all. They just put money in the companies and just let them run, let them lose, which sounds very foreign to me. For us at Primordial Lab, we want to, take care of our investment too, right? So if they need to hire a team, my hiring partners will help them find people. If they need like design support, whether it's like fundraising decks, which is almost all most of the time, a first prototype, branding, website, even like a very first version of the UI, whatever. I'll just like go in there, do whatever they need, and then come back. I always joke myself, like when people ask like what is my actual role in that part, I look at it as like I'm more like a like um, James Bond. I go in, I blow stuff up, and come back. I'm a one person design agency, if that makes sense.
I see. I see. When you ask the questions of like what is user research or how are you doing user research
Yeah,
for when you're doing the due diligence, is that a knockout question? Like can somebody answer that poorly and still get invested?
yeah, of course. This is just one of, I don't know, 50 things that we look at.
Yeah. How would you weigh that compared to the other 49 things? Like their emphasis on design.
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't have like a metric or any rule to like weigh
Yeah.
these things like in like a numerical way. It's all intuition and gut feelings that hey, they did bad in this area. Maybe it's a flag. Maybe we can ignore it. Let's look at all other 49 things too combined, and then we come to a conclusion that if they are good to make investment in or not.
Hmm. All right. How about this? I feel like you've talked to more founders than any other designer I know. And probably multitude of magnitudes higher. In your anecdotal experience, how well do most founders understand design? Like capital D design, like understanding user research, the true value of design beyond creating really splashy and flashy visuals and creating UIs or easy to use things.
Okay, of all the companies that I work with personally, I would say maybe 2 founders that really get it and have
Out
taste
of
out of
out of how many?
have cup, I know, several hundred.
Out of three? Three, right?
300, let's say. Um,
Fuck.
yeah, so that's exactly 1%, right? Yeah. I mean, it's
Oh,
a big part of it is taste. Is this person have taste or not? If a founder just have that, things can go very great because you can just inject a little bit of like this is what good design is, and they will get it. But for most other founders, like they just like straight engineers, straight business people, they just like, oh, design is what we should do. I don't know what it is, but we should do. That is all what they think about it.
so let's take away taste because when you talk about taste, oftentimes it's about the visual. It's about is this thing
Right.
cool? Like is this something that people will like or vibe with? What about understanding the business value of design and how this could be a strategic value in terms of creating future profit, right? Like it's like in some ways design overlaps with product management. And the value of design and user research is beyond like risk mitigation. It's about saving money. It's about creating value. It's about predicting and going in line with the future value that you can see. So you could be someone who is really bad at, who has no taste, right? There are designers out there with no taste. They cannot, they won't do well in Figma, but they are in some ways almost like PMs, and they're good at making the right decisions, the right strategic decisions. Are there founders who fall in that camp, who may not have the taste but understand the strategic business value of design?
So there are 2 parts to this question. I think one is that the area that I operate in is in deep tech specifically. So it just means like it's very science heavy, different companies, right? So it's gonna be a very far away until design can make an impact. That is obvious. And secondly, I work mostly with very early stage startups that they don't even have a product yet. They just have like research and R&D and that kind of stuff. So design is not even in the equation. It will be like, at least 5 or 10 years down the road. So it's just like a very foreign thing that they don't even know that they will need one day. So when we kick off a new investment, once we decided that we're going to work with them, that is also one of the things that I do, is that to plant these seeds in their minds, like how important the design can be for your companies. And I assess with the situations, and then they see when will be a good time for them to hire a first designer, because that will help them accelerate, right? Because if I do not push them to do it, it will be like maybe even until they collapse. Even if when the company fold, they will never hire a designer still, because
When would that be?
the value is not in how people use it. If we talk about like usability and all that stuff, it's more like if you are solving a user problem first, which is more like on the business side of things, and they focus on that.
So why do I ask for some clarification? Is design 5 to 10 years down the road talking about visual design / wireframes, or
I would say that include UX research, user research too.
got it? And when do you usually advise them to hire a designer? Like how many years in, what size, how many employees would they typically have before they get their first design?
I don't think there is a definite answer to that. It really depends on the type of the product that plays a huge role. I once worked with a VR AR company. Because of that alone, the topic alone, they need a designer as soon as possible. So I advise them like, hey, you just need to get one now, whether it's like an intern or a very junior designer. If you can afford a mid-level, great. Right? You just have to have one right now. Another one is a advanced material for fashion industry, right? Because it's already halfway in fashion, so they have to have a designer that have that kind of mindset to help they grow,
Mhm.
as opposed to a different one where it's a nuclear power plant. They might not need a designer ever, because the users who will operate the nuclear plants are going to be scientists who understand this very complicated UI already. So, and maybe even like 10 years in, they might not really need a UX designer at all. And I have to tell them the truth that, yeah, you say you care about design, UX is good, but there is just no UX use case in your company at all. And that's just the reality sometimes.
How can a startup last that long without design? From Ricardo. I have some thoughts on this, but
Well,
love to hear
good
yours.
question. Look around. There are many companies like that.
Yeah.
Like, if you have good seeding money, right, you can bootstrap and not have anything happen in the first 5 years. And then you just keep doing, and then 10 years is a very fast, quick to fly by, really. They can, yeah, if they stay nimble, they don't spend a lot, they keep their runway nice, they can last that long without design.
Joseph asks, in your experience, what percentage of investors / founders understand how much time it takes to bring new products to market?
Again, because most of the companies I work with are very early stage, most of these things are just guessing.
Yeah.
And they make a good guess. We can make a good guess too. And we kind of like see that if, both match and make sense or not. But most of the time, we don't really pay attention to these things, because it all change in, with new funding coming in next year. If they can raise another round or not, this will change, the speed and pace of all things. So I don't think this is what we care so much unless they have a ready to go product already. Then it increases the chance of their estimate is being right? Like, okay, this is ready to go. We just need money to put in this area, and then it will hit the shelf by next year.
All right, I'm gonna sidetrack a little bit because we've been talking about founders, and I want to get a better understanding of how VCs impact the decisions that founders make relative to design. Because as a designer, when I'm working with founders, I'm often very confused as to why we're doing things a certain way. And it's in some ways it seems almost counterintuitive, or it's not sustainable. Like we're doing things that feels like we're gonna hit a brick wall really, really soon. And I mean, now that I have a little bit more experience, I can look back and see, okay, I thought this way because I didn't really have visibility into what the VCs and founders are facing or thinking. What are some things that have been really surprising to you as you gotten to know VCs better?
So, let me put it this way. It will only be important to the VC if they think this will really impact the business in a substantial way. So if the company is competing in a very competitive market, right? The other competitors are really good at design. They have a good product design. Then you just want to follow suit. It's that simple. I don't know how to kind of like reframe that question. Maybe like, okay, and the business goal in this case, as a startup, is not making revenue yet, although that is also important and the product will take care of it. The more immediate business goal is to raise the next fundraising round. So is design going to help with that?
How does design help with that? Like, let's say you're working with an early stage startup. You're the first stage investor. So you help them with their seed or Series A.
Yep.
And they're thinking about how they can survive until the next founding threshold. Yep. Sorry, the funding threshold of Series B or so. What are they looking for, and how does design connect to that?
They're doing great without design so far. Will they continue on that trajectory? Right? If they are doing good, if they can raise money without design, then we can have a high confidence that they will keep doing it because the product is that good, right? Before you invest a company, you look at the core idea, the core product first, not the design. That is more like always a value add. It's rarely a core value proposition. So until it is a threat that if you having shitty design will not make it for you to make it to the next round, then design will never happen. I would say this. On top of that, most founders do not understand what design is. It's the same for VCs. They also do not understand what design is. It's a very shitty thing to say, but I would say that even half of the people that I work with do not know what I do.
What do they think you do?
They think I am a like what you said. I'm a tastemaker.
Huh.
I think I make things desirable, and the UX component of that is very kind of under the surface a little bit, right? It's not obvious to most people. So whether I do that or not, people still cannot see that easily unless I tell them. So most of the time, what they see is still going to be the visual part of it.
So you worked there for years, and I know you're a very strategic thinker. So from my perspective, if I enter a company, the first thing I do is I let everybody know what it is that I do and the value that I provide. Like I disabuse people of their misconceptions of what UX is and isn't. And I spend a lot of time and energy doing that.
Okay.
It sounds like you have chosen not to do that.
Yeah.
Is there a benefit to not doing that?
No, there's no benefit to not doing that. But in VC world, everything comes by trust. You trust that this person will do their best always for the benefit of the companies. That's what we do, right? We don't go around and ask like, hey, do you think what you're supporting is good for them or is it best for them, right? You just let them do what they do. I do what I do. I don't have to like report back. Like, hey, this month I help them do this and that. I help them, like initiative, starting like a research program or whatever. I just do that on the side, making sure that these companies that I'm taking care of are doing good. That's it, because that's why they hired you in the first place, because they know that you can do this kind of stuff, even though they do not understand what you actually do.
Got it. So here's a part that's a little bit upsetting to me personally because you work in an area that I am deeply passionate about and I really, really want to work in. You deal with climate stuff, robotics, AI stuff, all this really, really cool long-term strategic businesses and products that's going to impact us and humanity for the next 50, 100 years and longer. And as a designer, I want to work in these areas, but there doesn't seem to be many opportunities for a designer to break into climate tech, into robotics. If you were me, or if you were to give advice to someone like me who deeply wants to get their foot in the door and to work at these really exciting technology companies, what should I be doing or what should I be saying to convince them? Because they don't have a design role open, right?
Yeah.
The best I can do is maybe I can pitch something to the founder or maybe the VC or somebody there and say, I'm available. I know you are not hiring a designer right now, but here's what I can do. And here's why you should hire me right now.
Yeah, I think the best way you can do is do something like me, where you are a fractional designer or a small agency working with like all these companies at once. Because like the truth is that they need design, but not a full-time designer design, if that makes sense, right? Because their time horizon is like so long, they might really need design right now for 2 months and that's it. And they can run with that for like 5 years until they need another designer come on board. Of the 50, 60 companies I work with, I think there are only maybe 3 or 4 companies that I really actually help them build out a design team because they need it. The others, I just like went in and help with a few things, and that's it. They still operate smoothly to this day, because for these very deep tech companies, design is just not something that is a core need. What I watch the market closely too. I want to work on space stuff too, although I work kind of like in the area. Sometimes I just want to actually work hands-on on a space product. There was maybe only one role open up in the past couple of years. If you're really passionate and want to work on that kind of stuff, you just have to maybe start your own space company, robotic company, and then you can inject the design in for the first day.
That's
That's
great to
just
hear.
that's just
Very
the
sobering.
that's just
All
a
right.
sad
So
reality.
I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but work with me. I really want to join this space company or this climate tech company, and I understand they don't need a full-time designer, and I'm willing to be a fractional designer, come in. I just want to be a part of it, even for a short time. What are some of the things or the key points or pain points I should be hitting to get them interested in me? Like what is the value proposition that, is spoken in their language? Because from my perspective, I can talk about user experience and why this is super important and etc. But if they don't understand what design is, I'm not going to be able to educate them in the 30-minute call to get to that point. So I got to speak their language, right?
Yeah,
What should I be saying?
it's not what you say, it's what you do. You have to make it appear first so that they can see what you can do and what you're capable of. You have to be big. Like, so there's another space company that I work with that is making a commercial space station. They hired Philip Stark. I don't know if you know this name, but he
Yeah,
is,
he made a really cool mouse at one point.
yes, yeah, and a couple other things. True, yes.
Sure.
So he hired Philip Stark and his agency to design the interior design of this
Yeah.
space station. You have to be that big. And relate to that, I think both SpaceX and this company follow the kind of the same mindset. I think so. I think this is the pattern of how founders and we see things. They want the best people that have proven that they can do this stuff to do that work. So they made this like new version of spacesuit, right? If you look closely like to the past missions, the spacesuits that astronauts wear are much cooler these days. SpaceX hired this designer who did Marvel's movies, and then so you can see some resemblance there, like how this spacesuit like kind of got inspirations from that world. Now, this other company that I work with, they hired this designer that worked on I don't know, I might not get this right, but either Westworld or some space sci-fi series on HBO to design the suit. So you have to be that big, and people will find you. They did not have to advertise themselves that they are the best people in this area. But if they want to find someone specific that can do this kind of stuff, they will find you.
Okay. So you mentioned a bunch of design areas that are not within UX, right? You're talking about fashion design, industrial design,
Yep.
interior design. Philip Stark is huge, but in a very different design space. I would bet a lot of UX designers have never heard of him or don't really understand his work, including me, actually. So, who is the equivalent of the UX space? Is there somebody like that where people go directly to this person or this agency because they're just so damn
Yeah,
big?
I would say all the early Apple people,
Johnny Ive.
from Johnny to Salatio to I don't know, whoever that was on those teams.
Ugh. So if you're
Yeah,
not on those teams,
yeah, your chance got slimmer and slimmer, right? So yeah, working at big companies like that have their that kind of benefit too. It just makes it
yeah.
easier for you to get your name out there.
All
Right?
right. So
Johnny never really advertised himself at all, right? He never come on stage, but everybody knows him.
that is true. All right. So I want to show some comments because, Mary P, I can't really see her name because of the LinkedIn and StreamYard's integration isn't great. Mary P says that there's part of a nuclear plant that do not need design necessarily, but I sure want it easy to recover from an issue and need that to be very usable. And YDY mentions nuclear reactor, 3 Mile reactor disaster can be partially attributed to bad UX. And it could be something that's clear. So let me see. Rebecca Greer also mentions the last 100 years are littered with catastrophes and tragedies tied to poor UX. That is true. Are these examples of worst case scenarios compelling arguments to make when you're talking to these founders or VCs about the value of design?
Okay, let's take a nuclear plant, for example.
Yeah.
Let's say it takes 50 years to build and operate and be commercialized and run, functionally. Maybe until year 49 that you really need a designer to come in and fix all those problems in the, in the eyes of VCs, right? In the first
Yeah.
30, 40 years, why would you do that? It just doesn't return any money. I mean, it is bad. It could happen, all those like catastrophe, but it's so far away that people at the upstream either cannot see that or just like don't want to see that.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. It's more about the horizon, the time horizon of the value being created. This question is great by Erica Flowers. What is the view of service design and customer experience from this VC point of view instead of UX and interface / product design? I feel like most VC-backed companies need service design and CX more than they do touchpoint designers, but they never buy into it. And then it shows later on when a product may have high polish, but the actual holistic customer experiment does not.
Yeah, this is what I would also include in the taste of the founders. And if they get the, the whole spectrum of design and experience, right? From the VC point of view, this is something that the founders have to figure it out. Like we are not gonna. This is like gonna be too minute, too detailed for us to care about at the VC point level.
Okay,
Right.
that makes sense. I mean, they're not responsible for making sure that this product actually works well. It seems like something that they should get right. Maybe that's too low level, but these companies, these startups, almost never hire service designers. Like when I'm working with startup founders, the top requirements they have for me is somebody with really, really good visual design skills. Like they must have some kind of branding skills and some, animation skills added on top of that. And there isn't this request for service design. Like I'm pretty sure most of them don't even know what service design is or have never heard of it. But I think Erica, I agree with Erica. Like this is a pretty important point for many products out there. What are your
True.
thoughts on that?
I guess it's not a necessity. It's just either you care or you don't. Because again, you cannot easily prove that it impacts the bottom line of the business until something bad happens, and then you can see, oh, this is how big of a disaster it could create without proper service design. But when you started something from the beginning, you care more about the product itself alone. If it works, that's all.
Okay, so if it works or not, if it technically does the thing that it says it does, that I agree. Like that it needs to do that fundamentally speaking. But how does that tie in with the next funding stage? Like obviously that's a base requirement. But if a seed stage startup wants to get to Series A funding or go from Series A to Series B, what are some of the metrics that you might have for them to work with?
Yeah, then you have to have users, have customers. Are people willing to buy it? Right, that number alone, the trajectory will prove that what you're doing so far is doing well or not, and does it make sense for the next round investors to put in more money. And then maybe at that time people will circle back again and say, maybe is this a time to hire a designer yet? Will this be helping us having a competitive edge and get more market share? Right? Only at that point when uh, they would think that design is important.
So here's the missing link in my mind, where there are a fairly substantial group of designers who are very good at doing this, who are great at getting people to engage with the product, to purchase the product, to see the value in the product, and basically bump up the user numbers, the engagement metrics, whatnot, the revenue, the profit, etc. But oftentimes startups do not engage with this group of designers. They want designers who make really beautiful UIs, who can create the micro interactions that they see from the best apps, who can create the end-to-end flow and to solve all their design debt, on the marketing side, on their web page, on the buttons that they have. So there's this dissonance almost. Is there, or like, is my reading wrong here?
What's your
My reading that you're saying this is what VCs care about. This is how founders get to the next stage of funding for their startup, which is to get more users, get more engagement, get more buyers of their products, make more money, revenue, etc. And the designers who are really good at doing that are typically ignored by hiring managers or founders of early stage startups. Instead, the early stage startups typically go for designers with really, really good visual design, who can make really beautiful micro interactions, who can, who have worked on other products that they've heard of, that they've used,
Yep.
that they found to be successful. So there's this dissonance.
Yeah.
Am I
So
off here?
no, you are not off. I would say that at the most basic level, humans are a visual animal, right? So it makes sense for them to be drawn to visual things first and aesthetic, because it's just like easiest to digest, and it makes sense for people to kind of like be drawn to that first. Yes, so it has always been like this, and it only became more apparent in the past years because the climate, the market changed, right? Where now more designers have to be better at visual designs, right? But it has always been like that. I can come up with like many counter examples of like companies that do great that do not have good UX at all, but the product does like solve the problem, and because it solves the problem so well, they still do not need a design component in it at all.
Is there anything a designer can say? I mean, well, how about you, right? Like you see the other side, and you work with VCs and founders who might not care about design. Has there been success cases where you were able to help them see something or convince them to do something different? And how did you do it?
Well, back I have to had tips to Apple, because that is always the easiest way to explain these things, design to business people, to VCs. I would say, if you want your companies to be as successful as Apple, what do most people say about them? Like, they have great design. And then once I lead with that, then I can start educate them about what design actually is. It's a long game, right? So to this day, part of my job is also kind of like educating them, doing workshops like, okay, what is like design 101? What is research? Why is this like important? That kind of stuff. There was a case where we work on a product that it's like a prosthetic arm, limbs, that you ship to people, right? But they were in a bad design package. Again, this might be, in the industrial design part of it, but I think it relates. And so I went in and, kind of like consult them and break down all the problems that happened with that package. And then came up with like this new design so that it makes the shipping process smoother, less broken pieces when you ship, and that cut a lot of costs. Once people hear that, oh, you cut costs, they go full in. Right? You just have to like find some way to turn it into like a number that is the universal language. People understand that immediately. In UX and so design, I don't know. I probably could have, but it would be like much harder to make it a compel case that this is the exact number that you can get if you invest in this part.
It just feels like, when you talk about Apple, that's in some ways it's such a trite, and people use it all the time. And
Yeah.
it feels at this point in 2024, it feels very basic almost. It's like, are we still using that same example and analogy? Is it because most of them just haven't heard of this before, or is Apple still the top choice or the top example? The most
I think,
convincing example?
yeah, I think it still is because it is proven and it has a great track record. It has been like running for how many years and still doing great. So,
All right.
right, there's like no need to really look for other examples.
All right. I'm disappointed that I have to keep talking about Apple after all these years. This isn't really a question, but I would agree with this sentiment by Erica that I think most of these companies, though, don't actually endure. They bleed customers, attrition is out of control, retention is awful, and they have beautiful pixels, but then are desperate to fix their financial optics. And then when someone like me comes along, a business designer, they don't understand how I can actually design their business model to be a system that grows customers, revenue, and retention. And a few other people are saying, yeah, that's 100% correct.
Yeah.
And same with YDY saying, yeah, you're articulating how I'm feeling and feeling about this topic. Why is there such a disconnect? Because you're articulating exactly what they're looking for, and there are many designers who are saying, yes, that is what I can provide, but there is this gap for whatever reason.
I think part of it is because design is optimizing, it's not creating. So in that sense, it's already hard to talk to investors and founders that by investing in design, you are creating more value, because it's always like kind of like you're optimized back. You're doing this to prevent bad things to happen. You do this to prevent users leaving, right? It's, I don't know, maybe that in rare cases you can argue that, oh, by having great design first, people will come more. But it's just like a harder argument to make.
Do you
I
feel
don't.
like designers need... Sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
Maybe I'm just too pessimistic of a person, but I get the feeling that in order to be believed or to be taken seriously, you do have to start your own company and be design led, and then find and document success in doing that, and then pointing to that in the future. Like it sounds like oftentimes it's based on name, on branding, as opposed to logic at times.
Yes, 100%. I think we as designers are sometimes too much of a logical breed. Business and the world doesn't run like that. It's all emotional. People buy because emotions. Um, so what I'm gonna say is that if they lose users, lose revenue because of that design, they can make up from other parts. If they still continue to sell well, if they can, keep, getting new business, then again, it's going to be hard for them to really care about design.
All right. This is a sensitive question and feel free to pass on it, but there are a ton of layoffs right now across the board, and
Yep.
they're definitely affecting startups as well. How does that work from the VC's perspective? Because from an IC or our lower manager perspective, it sounds like somebody's up there decided to cut a percentage of their workforce, and then somebody else decides how they hit those numbers, like how many designers and researchers and content writers should you cut relative to engineers, PMs, and other roles. Is there something that most of us are missing from the bottom layer on what is happening on the higher top layers? Like what is driving the pressure and decision making?
Yeah. So again, I mean, we are, and as designers and tech people are directly impact to it. So it's hard to not have emotions about it, right? But if you step back a lot, like step way back, look at it as a business. This is what how you would run your business too. Again, investing in a company, investing in a stock is the same. If you are losing, you have to cut loss. That is the basic how you do with the stock market. You don't look at it as people anymore. You look at it as just numbers. You just look at the line item on a spreadsheet. Which department can I cut? That will affect little to the business. How
Yeah.
long, more runway can I get from cutting these departments that are not producing as much values and it's not core to the business. As sad as it might sound, this is just the nature of business. There's nothing that you're missing, they just have to cut, because imagine a different scenario. If they keep everyone on, the business dies next year, then 100% of people will be out of job anyway. It's a shittier scenario that could happen, and people don't want to think that way, and they kind of like, yeah.
So that part I get. What I'm confused about as an IC is oftentimes it seems like a lot of startups are laying people off right now, right? Across different industries, across different product lines. And it feels like there's something that's changing across the board. And it's not just the market or the end user consumer side. Why are these businesses at risk of collapsing recently? Is it related to VCs and their funding or their investment cycles or patterns or behavior?
Yeah, it's just in this climate, it's just making it harder to get money, right? This impacts everyone. Banks collapse. When a bank collapse, it just affects everyone, right? So VC would want to reserve cash and put into the companies that they are more sure of, right? That means they cannot make as many gambles as they could before. So more than half of the companies will have like harder time raising money, especially companies that need a lot of capital to run, right? The more you need, the more you have to prove that you can get there to the next milestones. So it could take twice or three times longer to raise another round, right? So it just affects everyone from the largest companies to the smallest ones.
Got it. We're at time right now. Do you have a few more minutes? Because
Yeah.
I have maybe one or two more questions. So, if I'm a designer looking for work right now and I'm interviewing at startups, and these startups aren't really being super transparent about their runway, for example,
hmm
what are some of the signals I should be looking for to make sure that they're going to more likely to be successful and less likely to lay me off in the next 6 months or a year?
Okay, so one is that they should be transparent. It's not a secret. It shouldn't be a secret. They can and need to be transparent. If you're like, okay, this is the runway, this is how long we have before we run out of money if it don't raise. The next follow-up question would be, then how confident are you in raising the next round, right, to extend the runway? What's the plan in that? So you have to already talk in those like kind of business milestones. To be laid off or not in the next 6 months or 1 year, who knows? Maybe there's another COVID 2025. If that happens, we are all doomed again, and things will go back to like 3 years ago again. So what you hear today might not be true in the next 6 months anyway. So I rarely put much thoughts into those things. Nobody can promise you.
Okay, I agree with that. But at the same time, when you ask people how it's going, startup founders typically will, my assumption is they will gloss over it. Things are going great.
Yeah.
No one wants to say we have like, 6 months of runway left and we have no plan. We have no idea of how to raise money in this current climate. Everybody's going to say, we have a plan. We're going to do great.
Yep.
What
What
are
is the
some
plan?
questions that you can,
Yeah. What
well,
is the
what are,
plan? Tell me. Lay down your plan. I want to know. I
okay,
am gonna be
seriously, other
part of this.
problem.
Yeah.
I'm a designer. I don't understand how these plans work. I cannot tell a difference between a good plan and a bad plan.
Okay.
What's a good plan?
Well, that is a very big question. And it can go so many different ways. I think I cannot give you a definite answer right now. What a good plan looks like. It's more like after they laid out the plan to you, do you feel it makes sense? Do you feel that they can make it happen? How confident you have in the founder? Because most of the time, the company runs around the founders, right? If you have little trust in the capability of the founders, then probably you are right. The company will not succeed. Without doing all the numbers, right there, I wouldn't be able to tell to like if this is a good plan or not. It's just like kind of like, again, like intuition and gut feelings. But to be able to have that, I think you have to kind of like study some business case studies and collect this kind of like knowledge, and then you'll be able to at least understand what they are talking about.
Where can I find these business case studies?
Well, good question. I don't know. I read a lot of news. Especially when a company fails, and I read back, the whole history of like what led them to this point, and I track back like what went wrong, what went right, and then I know a lot from these like big publishers like Harvard Business Reviews, stuff like that. And then even at VC firms, some of them will have like writing these articles about how they invest in their companies and how their companies run. So I think you can start to decide, get some understanding of like these like business acumen.
This is probably a dumb question, but what are you looking for in a founder from a VC's perspective? Because I feel like as a designer, I might be looking for very different things, right? I might be looking for their understanding of design, for example, or why they're bringing me in, and maybe how they collaborate with me one on one. And I have a small guess that the VCs aren't really looking for those things when they're deciding whether or not to fund a founder's company. So, what are some things that you're looking for so that maybe we can ask these questions and get a better idea of, is this founder someone who can raise more capital later on?
Okay, so I think, do you want to play safe or do you want to go big? Because WeWork would be a good example of what VC look for a founder like that. They want
Somebody who
crazy.
doesn't wear shoes.
I don't want to say crazy because that is not sensitive these days. People like them, right?
Huh.
You have, I don't know, it's not even confident. You are biased that this person can do whatever it takes to make this business successful, whether or not that's true or not. Right?
What are some signs? Like, because you can't ask that question. You cannot ask, will you do whatever it takes to be successful?
maybe
We're just going to say yes.
Maybe you can. You can start with questions like that and keep grilling them. See until when they break.
What are some signs you might be looking for? What's a question you can ask, a behavioral question that can help answer that? Because you cannot ask that directly.
That's might be true or not true. I have asked those questions before. I just like straightforward. What will you do? Whatever it takes. They will say yes. What will you do? Tell me.
What's a good answer? What's an answer where you're like, holy shit, I need to. This person will.
Okay.
Like.
The best answers I heard were, I would move to London if it needs this business to succeed, because the majority of like customers will be concentrated there, and investment money for the next round would be there because it's like more related to their business. Okay, they would, and I will just keep going. Like, okay, would you move next week if we say that it's a good idea? Yeah,
it's like,
and then
a game of chicken.
Kind of, but that's just like one of the scenarios, and then you just like keep kind of like grilling them from different angles, and then at the end people will break. Nobody has like all the answers, but it is in the end that you as a person kind of like have to assess this, like, is this someone you have high trust that they can make it succeed, or at least you can go along for a few years and see if it succeeds.
I find this fascinating. I feel like, okay. Like,
yeah, one thing I always kind of say to my wife is that bad people have more drive than good people, right? If you compare two people with like very equal qualifications, one want to conquer the world, where the other one just want to make world peace. The drive to want to destroy all will be much stronger always. That kind of make this into like this trope of like all the evil founders we see these days from the news, and because of that drive, that is what make them succeed.
If Genghis Khan took a time machine and interviewed with Prime Movers Lab,
Oh yeah.
would you give Genghis Khan the
Very
money
like. I would say he would be on the top list.
top list?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And with that, we conclude this talk. Thank you so much, JJ.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. All right, then. Thanks everyone for tuning in and staying till the end for this. Oh boy. Okay, cool. Have a wonderful day, everyone. End the stream now.